This episode begins with Scott, who went to spend time with his sister Jessica and his nephew, Gretchen. The both siblings admire Gretchen so much because she looks so carefree, which is the childhood they never got. Gretchen runs to Scott and asks him to do the thing. Scott suddenly makes his hands to glow, bringing out lightning, making us to discover that he is a superpowered being. Scott walks with his sister and nephew to their apartment. He tells them he wants to go grab a coffee before he comes up. After he grabs the coffee, a very massive blast occurred in the middle of the city where the apartment is. This was the moment when Mark was trying to stop his psychotic dad Omni-Man from taking over the world. The fight causes Scott's sister's apartment to collapse. He sees Invisible with Jessica ripped off arm, and believes he was the one that killed Jessica and Gretchen, not knowing Invincible was trying to save them at that moment. Later after that, Scott meets with the attorney in the city called Barnett. He apologized for ambushing her like that because she wasn't returning his calls. He has been calling her office about what he believes Invisible did to his sister and nephew. His sister Jessica raised him after their parents died. She brought an amazing daughter into this world, and they both died. To Scott, it feels like no one cares about the deaths of his sister and nephew, because why is no police holding an investigation on Invincible? The attorney replies that Invincible was only defending the planet from an alien threat, but Scott feels no matter how innocent Invisible could be in this matter, it's more justifiable to open an investigation and let a jury decide. The attorney tells him she's sorry for his loss and that there is nothing she can do, because the laws doesn't apply in situations like this. Scott is so pissed off and decided to do the investigation himself. He joins the Cecil Lab research team, where he could be able to find out about Invisible whereabouts and his weaknesses. He even watches video footages of all the fights of Invincible. At the city, an elephant monster attacks some people in a restaurant, but Oliver shows up and stops the superhuman with a punch. Invisible tells Oliver to be careful. He has to watch out for other people, but Oliver doesn't listen. Mark is pissed that Oliver never listens to him, but Eve tells him that no one wants to listen to their older brother. Eve tells Oliver to keep the fight against the superhuman away from the restaurant. If the place gets trashed, they won't have burgers after he's done fighting. The elephant villain sees this as an offense, as he realized that they are only using him to train. Oliver tells Mark he wants to fight someone tougher, but Mark tells him only if he's ready. Oliver clears out that he already fought real villains, so why would he have to be fighting lamos like the elephant? But Invisible replies that Dad also made him to fight the elephant when he just started. Oliver remembers the horrible things their dad did, and asks if the people will ever forgive him. He knows Omni-Man did a bad thing for trying to take over the world, but he saved a lot of people before that. He tells Mark that he still remembers everything that happened when he was a baby, and knows his mom loves Omni-Man so much. If his mom could love him, that's because she must have known that he was good inside. Mark confessed he still loves their dad too, but he was two different people. One was the dad Oliver and him knew when they were kids, but the other was a Viltrumite, who had a mission to do even if that meant hurting a lot of people. Oliver asks Mark which one is the real dad, but Mark doesn't really have an answer to that. On the other hand, Scott makes a costume for himself, and practices on how he is going to confront Invisible to blame him for the deaths of his sister and his nephew, and as well as the lives that was taken. He gives himself a new name called Powerplex. Scott has a wife who supports him too on his idea on revenge. She places some discs on his body, which will put him on Invincible level, and allow him to store enough power to hurt Invisible. He knows there is no going back from what he's about to do, but his wife replied that Jessica meant everything to her too. After his wife places all the discs on his body, she brings out a hammer and begins to hit his chest upon his instructions, and this somehow recharges it, making his lightning power much more powerful. He is happy that this worked, but suddenly began to cry because he missed his sister so much. We hear a cry of a baby, revealing to us that the both couples have a baby. Mark and his family had dinner later that night. Oliver tells Debbie that he wouldn't call what he did today a fight, since he could have knocked down the elephant guy within seconds, but Mark and Eve says he needs to learn the basics. Debbie tells Eve how Mark has been bragging about her because she aced her last test at school. Mark compliments Debbie's boyfriend Paul, concerning how delicious his food is. Paul asks Mark and Eve how the business they started had been going. Mark tells him they are on retainer at Paid in prison, and explains that whenever they have a breakout or attack, they call them for help, but recently there have been no breakout in the prison. Is like the last job they did there convinced everyone to back off. Paul tells them about his real estate business, but none of them apart from Debbie was able to relate, because they are all superheroes. While washing the dishes, he asks Debbie how he can be able to fit in. Mark and Oliver are great kids, but how can he relate to them? They save the world, so he wonders how he can measure up to that. Debbie tells him it isn't about measuring up, but always being there for them that matters. Mark later hangs out with Eve and his best friend as they play bowling together. His ex-girlfriend Amber shows up at the place with her new boyfriend Kyle, and everything seemed awkward for the moment, until Mark realizes that Kyle is a fan of Seance Dog, and they both started to relate with each other. Just as they are about to begin a bowling game, they see a supervillain on the news freaking out in the middle of the city, and that person turns out to be Scott. Scott tells all the police to back down because he doesn't want to hurt anyone. All he wants is invisible. Since they are here to celebrate his best friend's birthday, Mark decided to take a night off and ignore the chaos, believing there are other superheroes out there that can handle the matter. Scott tells the citizens that this isn't about him, but about the thousands of people Invisible murdered. Why is Invisible above the law? Why does Invisible never pay for his crimes? He tells the people that he is here for justice. A superhero called Shapesmith, a member of the Guardians of the Globe, shows up to stop Scott. Scott warns that he doesn't want to fight it. All he wants is Invisible. Shapesmith punches him, but Scott keeps holding back because he doesn't want to hurt him, but couldn't hold his anger anymore and release a lightning that did not only send Shapesmith flying, but it also killed him. Scott tells everyone that he tried to warn Shapesmith. He didn't mean to kill him, but he attacked him first. Scott runs back home and tells his wife that he messed up, but his wife tells him not to worry because the police didn't follow him here. He wonders why Invisible didn't show up and he was even on the news, but his wife tells him that Invisible might have not shown up because facing him in front of cameras could have proved his point. His wife tells him not to give up, because the city is holding a memorial about all the lives that was lost tomorrow morning, and Invisible is going to be there. Eve and Mark wears their suits to attend the memorial. Paul tells them that he might not be uncomfortable if they plan to use powers like teleportation to arrive at the event, but Debbie tells him not to worry that they are taking the car. But it was still a bit much for Paul, because Mark carries the car as he flies it to the event. Rudy decided to surprise Monster Girl since he likes her. Monster Girl has this curse which is about her getting young each time she turns into a monster. Rudy designed a belt for her, and as Monster Girl wears it, she realized that the belt stops the curse from taking effect. That means she won't be de-aging anymore whenever she turns into a monster. Monster Girl cries and hugs Rudy, thanking him for breaking her curse. Ray goes to see Rex in his bedroom. Rex thinks she came to tell him about the dinner they had last night, but to Rex's surprise, Ray tells him that she wants to quit from being a superhero. She wants Rex to quit too, so they can start a farm together and live peacefully, instead of a life of being superheroes where they might both get killed. She asks Rex if he is happy getting killed over and over again so other people can live the life they never get. Rex tells her you don't get to be happy, that's just the way it is, but Ray tells him they deserve better. When Rex was little, the government bought him from his parents when they found out he was special, and they erased everything else about him when they made him into this. Rex isn't some secret identity, it is his identity and it is all he has. If he gives that identity up, he won't have anything else. Rex tells her he still wants to remain a superhero, but Ray's decision of leaving is still the same. He says goodbye to her as they both kiss. Just as Mark and his family attended the memorial, during the speech, Scott shows up and collects the microphone from the speaker. He calls some names on his list, stating that these are some out of the 2,000 people that was murdered by Omni-Man and his son. He calls on Invisible to come and face justice for the lives he has taken. Eve tells Mark to stay back and let her handle it. The man is disturbed, and him showing up might only make things worse. Eve tries her best to stop him, but it's too hard for her because powerplex gets stronger whenever she hits him. The Guardian of the Globe shows up at the scene to help, and Shapesmith turned out to still be alive. Eve tells the Guardian of the Globe to take it from here, and flies away. After the Guardian of the Globe defeated him, they handed him to some tech troopers who handcuffs him as they take him to a special prison. Scott hits his head on the truck and this makes him more stronger, which he uses to knock out the tech troopers and escapes to go find Invisible. Scott is really angry that after everything, he still didn't get his chance to get his revenge on Invisible. And he is screwed because the G-Deer will be here for him any minutes. He tells his wife to escape with their baby, but his wife is ready to stay with him until the end. Cecil's assistant meets Mark on a rooftop without Cecil knowledge. He gives Mark all the information about Powerplex. His real name is Scott Duvall. Until today he was a researcher in one of their labs, which is how he got his hands on experimental storage technology, which enhances what seems to be a low-level energy absorption superpower. Mark wants to meet Scott as he doesn't want him hurting anyone else because of him. Donald tells Invisible that Scott is presently about to hurt an innocent citizen and her baby. That the innocent citizen is actually Scott's wife and baby. His wife planned this with him, so to help him get Invisible's attention. He apologized to his baby for involving him in this mess, and tells his wife to remember, they have to believe he kidnapped them. Invisible shows up to tell Scott how sorry he is for his losses, but hurting other people won't bring his sister back. That statement pisses Powerplex up, and he attacks Invisible. He uses all his powers and sends it at Invisible to try and kill him, but the lightning touches his wife and baby, and they got roasted to death. Scott grows more angry and strikes at Invisible again with all his powers, but Invisible holds himself back as he understands his pain and hugs him tight to hold him. Scott is taken to the GDA headquarters for rehabilitation, where Invisible goes to have a alone moment with him. He blames himself for everything that happened to the people he loves and hopes that gives Scott comfort, but Scott tells him that his hatred for him will never die. Because of Invincible, he lost everything. When he finds his way free out of here, he will find him and must kill him. Eve goes to comfort Mark, who feels guilty about everything, but unknown to them, there is a camera in the sky spying on them. The person spying on Mark is revealed to be Angstrom. He made alliances with different Marks from different dimensions to take down Mark. And that was how the episode ended.